Hey guys, tonight we're headed to the high desert, where ancient stone villages cling to the sides of cliffs like stubborn barnacles on the ribs of time. The sun's gone soft, painting everything in warm ochre and sleepy lavender. You're standing in silence beneath the towering canyon walls of the American Southwest, the kind that echo even your slowest exhale. Somewhere up there, tucked into the rock, are the quiet remains of a people who built entire lives into impossible ledges homes with no front lawns, no insulation, and definitely no elevators. You probably won't survive this without a ladder or at least a decent pair of hiking boots. But don't worry tonight, we're just visiting. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive at the base of the canyon just as the day exhales its last breath of light. The shadows stretch long and lazy, curling over brush and rock like dark fingers reaching back into the past. The air smells like dust and sage, the dry kind that sticks to your nostrils and makes you feel thirsty in places you didn't know could be dry. Above you, high up in the cliff face, you catch the first glimpse, a crumbling stone wall, the edge of a window, maybe even the ghost of a doorway. It doesn't look like much from here, but that's only because your modern brain is still calibrating. This place is older than castles, older than Shakespeare, older than excuses. It's quiet eerily. So, no highway hum, no screen glow, just the occasional rustle of wind through yucca and the distant bark of a coyote who seems personally offended by your presence. You take a step closer, and your foot crunches over loose gravel. Even that sounds loud here. You pause, feeling small under the looming cliffs. These aren't just rocks. These are the bones of an old, stubborn civilization that refused to live somewhere ordinary. A people now collectively known as the Ancestral Puebloans, formerly referred to as the Anasazi, though that name's fallen out of favor, mostly because it's not what they called themselves, and it may have originally meant something along the lines of enemy ancestors. Not the warmest nickname. Historians still argue whether these cliffside dwellings were built purely for defense, or if maybe, just maybe, the ancient Southwest had its own version of high-rise real estate. Envy. After all, nothing says status symbol like hauling every brick of your house up a sheer rock wall. You find a shady rock and sit for a moment. The air cools fast out here after sunset. You start to imagine what it was like to live here centuries ago. No central heating, no ice machine, and definitely no food delivery. Just you, the stars, and about 2,000 years of tradition whispering through the cracks in the sandstone. A rabbit hops by, unbothered. Somewhere up on that cliff, a shadow moves. Probably a bird or maybe a squirrel. Hopefully a bird. You tell yourself it's a bird. You squint at the cliff face. From below, the dwellings look like something from a dream. Tiny windows, soft corners, gentle lines that follow the curves of the rock like they grew there. The walls blend into the cliff so well you wonder how many people walked past without ever knowing they were being watched from above. There's something soothing in the way the architecture melts into the land. No straight angles, no glass or concrete, just mud, stone, and wood stacked and layered like pastry, but less edible. Unless you're extremely desperate. The ancient builders used sandstone from the area, mixing it with water and something charmingly called puddle clay to make mortar. Sometimes they reinforced it with straw or twigs. The result? Cozy, curving rooms that have survived centuries of rain, wind, and the occasional overeager archaeologist. You run your fingers over a fallen piece of wall. It crumbles slightly, releasing a powdery scent of earth and time. This is architecture with patience. Nothing prefabricated, nothing from IKEA. Just human hands and a whole lot of stubborn dot, and the views? Unbeatable. From up there, you'd see the whole canyon floor watching. Weather roll in from miles away, counting clouds, maybe even spotting visitors like you before you spotted them. Home security before home security systems. You stand again, stretching your back, which already misses your mattress. But there's more to see, more to feel. The cliff still waits above, its homes nestled into niches like secrets too sleepy to tell themselves. One foot in front of the other, you'll climb soon. But first, just stand here for one more breath. Listen, smell. Let the canyon greet you the slow way, because this story, it doesn't rush. And neither should you. You start the climb with something between excitement and quiet dread. The cliff looms above you, not terrifyingly steep, just persistent, like a ladder that forgot it was supposed to end. You eye the ancient footholds carved into the stone. Small indentations, just deep enough to fit a toe or two, scattered in a vertical line up the face of the rock. They're worn smooth by centuries of feet, some smaller than yours, some likely much braver. There's no rope, no safety net, no official trail marker. Just stone, wind, and a whole lot of upward. You begin slowly, placing each foot like it's your last good one. Hand to rock, weight forward, breath steady. The first few holds are easy enough, though you wonder how anyone ever did this while carrying a jug of water, a toddler, or the 700th piece of sandstone for that day's wall. Still, the process is oddly soothing. Left foot. Right hand. Pause. You climb not with speed, but with rhythm, the canyon gently echoing the sound of your breath and the soft scrape of your shoes. You picture someone doing this in the year 1150, in leather sandals with frayed laces and no sunscreen. You're already sweating and you have a microfiber shirt. Historians still argue whether these cliffs were chosen for defense high vantage points, harder to raid, or for spiritual reasons. Maybe it was both. Or maybe, just maybe, it was for the same reason we all secretly want a corner apartment on the top floor. Fewer neighbors. Stomping overhead, you reach a ledge about halfway up and stop to catch your breath. The view already feels unfair. Below, the canyon stretches out in layers of red and gold, like the desert decided to become a topographical cake. Above, more sandstone. The lines in the rock rippling like frozen waves. To your left is a tiny platform, maybe once a lookout point, or a ledge for drying corn in the sun. You sit on it for a moment, imagining what it was like to be a kid here. No swing sets, no cartoons, but plenty of opportunities to dangle your feet over a 40-foot drop while munching on roasted squash seeds. The wind picks up a little, brushing your face with dry air and the faint smell of juniper. You hear a flutter and look up. Just a crow, landing noisily on a wooden beam sticking out from the wall. The beam is old, worn, and astonishingly still there. These were roof supports once, part of a second or third story. The ancient Puebloans built vertically, stacking rooms like bricks, connected by ladders and small doorways. If you wanted to visit your neighbor, you didn't knock, you climbed out. You take a few more steps up, and then you're there at the first level of what was once a bustling neighborhood in the sky. The doorway is small, really small. You duck to enter, barely squeezing through the frame, and wonder if these people were shorter or just better at tucking in their elbows. Inside, the air changes, cooler, quieter. Still, you're surrounded by stone walls, some patched with faded plaster, others etched with little finger marks or bits of cold-drawn symbols. It's dim but not dark. Just the kind of soft, dusty lighting that makes you whisper without knowing why. You can almost feel the echoes of daily life here, footsteps padding across clay floors. The quiet clink of pottery, a mother's voice telling her child not to. Climb the ladder sideways again. You stand still, letting the room breathe around you. The layout's simple. One room, about the size of a generous walk-in closet. A small corner hearth. A couple of niches carved into the wall storage for tools, maybe, or bundles of dried herbs. No furniture, but maybe some woven mats, now long gone. You run your hand across the wall and find faint remnants of red pigment, just enough to suggest someone once cared how it looked. Archaeologists call these room blocks, and each could serve different functions. Some were kitchens, some bedrooms, others possibly storage or spiritual use. It's hard to know. There's no labeling system, no sticky notes left behind. Just layers of dust and educated guesses. One thing's for sure, this wasn't temporary. These cliff dwellings weren't built for a quick stopover. They were homes long-term, painstakingly constructed, and filled with generations of lives, laughter, food smells, and probably a lot of annoyed muttering about how someone moved the ladder again. You peek through one of the small windows. View is unreal. You're high above the canyon floor now, the desert spread out like a sleepy ocean of stone and brush. The horizon flickers with heat waves. Far in the distance, a thunderhead gathers, puffy and slow-moving, like a gnat rolling. In from the east, you duck back inside. The walls seem to hold stories in their silence. You think about how many people pass through this room carrying baskets, singing softly, resting after long walks to water sources, maybe arguing about something mundane, maybe dreaming about something grand, and maybe they paused, just like you, to sit in this quiet space and wonder what came next. You take a step further into the cliffside village, and suddenly, the architecture unfolds like a well-kept secret. What you thought was just one room is actually part of a complex warren of small, interlinked spaces, all huddled together like neighbors whispering behind cupped hands. Some rooms are connected by doorways barely big enough to crawl through. Others open out onto narrow ledges or internal courtyards no larger than a modest kitchen mat. The walls lean just slightly, some from time, others from design. Nothing is truly square. It's like a village built from memory rather than blueprints, and somehow it all works. You wander through passageways so tight you have to turn sideways, then suddenly emerge into a larger space where sunlight streams. And from a missing roof beam casting slanted gold across the dusty floor, you pause, letting your eyes adjust. This room must have been important larger than the others, with soot-blackened walls and a hearth still marked by ancient ash. The smell of old smoke lingers faintly, as if someone just cooked here. Maybe 800 years ago. You imagine a family, seated in a circle, grinding corn with stone tools, the rhythmic scrape echoing against the walls. A pot simmers over the coals, sending up gentle plumes of steam. A child tosses a pebble, is hushed by a grandparent with a feather tucked behind. One ear. The room is alive again, if only for a moment. Historians still argue whether each cluster of rooms was a nuclear family unit or a more communal setup, shared sleeping quarters, shared cooking, shared everything. But looking around, it's easy to picture both. Maybe some days you wanted company. Other days you just needed your own quiet corner and a place to store your favorite pumpkin seeds. The ceilings, if still intact, are surprisingly low. You try not to bump your head on the heavy wooden beams, thick, round, and darkened by time. These were cut from trees hauled in from many miles away. The forest didn't grow right here. The people made intentional journeys to get the right wood, the right size, the right straightness. No quick trip to the hardware store. Just you, a stone axe, and possibly a mule if you were lucky. You peek into a side chamber. This one's darker, cooler, and filled with fallen rubble. Still, in one corner, you spot the rounded outline of A pottery shard, its edge worn smooth, its surface faintly painted with geometric lines. You kneel down and run a finger over it. It's just clay, hardened by fire, forgotten by time. But someone made this. Someone shaped it, painted it, filled it, probably dropped it, and definitely didn't expect you to be poking at it centuries later. Some rooms have niches, built into the walls like little shelves for storing daily life. You spot a few with tiny fragments, twisted bits of yucca cord, a dried corn cob that somehow survived, even a piece of shell jewelry that gleams faintly in the low light. Evidence of trade, perhaps. After all, these weren't isolated communities. The ancestral Puebloans had trading networks that spanned hundreds of miles, reaching toward what's now Mexico and California. You picture traders trudging through deserts, their sandals full of sand and their pouches full of turquoise, feathers, obsidian, and dried chili peppers. Not a bad shopping list. As you duck through yet another narrow passage, you start to notice how intentional the layout feels. Rooms flow from one to another like they were designed to guide footsteps and control. Airflow. Sunlight enters just enough to warm the morning without cooking you by noon. Windows are placed high, perfect for ventilation and maybe the occasional glimpse of the stars. It's surprisingly efficient. Passive cooling, natural insulation, clever use of materials. This isn't primitive. It's practical. It's smart. You've seen modern apartments with worse floor plans. A lizard darts across the threshold, reminding you you're not alone. Somewhere nearby, maybe tucked behind a stack of stones or under a collapsed roof, is the den of some little creature who's made this place home long after its builders moved on. You sit on a flat stone in what might have been a living room, or a workshop, or a place to gossip about the next corn planting. The longer you sit, the more the silence folds around you. Not empty silence, but full, humming silence. The kind that holds memory, the kind that slows your heart rate and makes your eyelids drift lower. You run your hand over another wall. This one's smoother, almost polished. There are faint markings, maybe ceremonial, maybe just someone doodling with coal after a long day. One line curves into another. It could be art. It could be boredom. It could be a calendar. Historians are still arguing about that too. The air is thick with dust motes and stories. You breathe it all in earth, ash, old dreams. You're not just walking through ruins. You're moving through a kind of memory palace where every wall has seen more than it's willing to tell, and yet, it tells you just enough. You duck once more beneath a wooden lintel splintered, sun-bleached, and still somehow holding strong and step into another compact room. This one smells different. Dustier, a little smokier, as though the walls themselves have absorbed every cooking fire that ever warmed its stones. You squint toward the far end, where a shallow pit rests beneath a pile of blackened soot and shattered pottery. This is a hearth. Not the kind with decorative tiles or fire pokers. No mantle, no gas line. Just a shallow depression in the floor, ringed by stones, still faintly crusted with the last traces of ash. This, in a way, was the beating heart of a home. Not just a place to cook, but to gather, to warm, to share stories and quiet sighs after long walks in the desert heat. You kneel beside it, imagining the smoke curling gently upward into the rafters, escaping through a small hole above. No chimney. Just airflow managed by careful design and a deep understanding of how warm air rises. Ingenious, really. The room stays warm at night, cool by day, and somehow doesn't fill with smoke unless someone gets too enthusiastic with a chili roasting. In the corner, a metate, a flat grinding stone, sits nestled into the floor like it never left. Next to it, the mano, the rounded handheld stone used to grind corn kernels into meal. You reach out and gently rest your hand on it. It's smooth, worn into a shallow curve from countless hours of work. Generations of arms moved in the same circular motion, day after day, grinding, humming, thinking. Probably complaining too. Grinding corn was not glamorous. Historians estimate it took 4 hours a day just to prepare enough cornmeal for a small family. That's a lot of circular arm motion and honestly, a pretty solid upper body workout. You imagine gossiping with your neighbors while you grind, pausing occasionally to swat flies or tell a child not to sit on the dog again. Corn, or maize, wasn't just a staple, it was the cornerstone of survival. It was eaten in every form: mush, cakes, roasted ears, even fermented drinks. And it wasn't alone. Squash, beans, amaranth, wild greens, and the occasional roasted rabbit or lizard spiced things up. If you were really lucky, maybe some dried fruit from a neighboring village's trade. You look around at the shelves, simple indentations in the wall, really. Here, someone likely stored parched corn, herbs, maybe a carefully carved spoon passed down for generations. It's humbling. Everything had to be made, stored, maintained. There were no backups, no second fridge, no midnight cereal runs. You used what you had. And if you ran out, well, you had a very long walk ahead of you. There's another pot, half, buried in sand near the hearth. It's cracked, but still decorated in black and white geometrics that echo through time like visual whispers. Some designs are jagged, others swirl like gusts of desert wind. Scholars still debate their meanings. Were they just pretty patterns? Calendrical symbols? Sacred messages? Or maybe all three? Or maybe none. Maybe they just looked cool. You've doodled stranger things during boring Zoom calls. In the back of the room, tucked beneath a slab of rock, you find the charred bones of what might have been a small bird. Cooking leftovers? A ceremonial offering? Or, more likely, a snack that didn't end well. Either way, it's a quiet reminder. Life here wasn't just sustainable, it was improvisational. You used what you could catch, or what wandered too close. The more you look, the more the room reveals its gentle rhythms. The hearth isn't centered, it's placed off to one side, likely to avoid smoke buildup or to accommodate different cooking tools. The soot marks climb the walls in layers like tree rings, telling stories of seasonal fires and changing diets. You close your eyes for a moment and picture it, the gentle clatter of wooden spoons, the bubbling of stew made from wild onion and chunks of roasted squash, a grandmother humming while stirring, a child pretending a stick is a bird, flapping through the air. A dog might be curled by the fire. Someone might be weaving, their fingers working a rhythm older than language. Outside, the wind might whistle past the ledge, but in here, it's warm, smoky, and safe. The room shifts not physically, but in memory. You sense its layers. Not just a place of food prep, but of daily anchoring. A space where comfort and necessity met, where someone woke early to light the fire, and another stayed up late to whisper beside it. You reach into your pocket, reflexively checking for your phone, and remember, there's no signal out here. Not in the cliffs, not in the past. Just stone, silence, and the faint echo of simmering stew. And somehow, that's more than enough. You move slowly now, your footsteps soft on the packed earth floor. Just beyond the main room, you find a small chamber, no door, just an opening low enough to make you duck again. You enter sideways, feeling the cool, enclosed air wrap around. You like a blanket that's a little rough, but surprisingly welcome. This, you realize, might have been a sleeping room. No hearth, no soot on the walls. Just 4 stone boundaries enclosing a darkened hush. It's smaller than you expected, maybe 8 feet long, 6 feet wide, and low enough that even if you sat up quickly in bed, you'd hit your head, assuming there was a bed. which their WSN single quotes T. Instead, you spot the woven imprint of a mat on the floor, a faint pattern in the dust where plant fibers once lay. Yucca, probably. Soft if dried properly, stiff if not. You picture yourself curling up. On that mat, limbs aching from a day of grinding corn or hauling water. No mattress, no blanket, just furs. Or maybe a woven textile if your family was lucky. You settle into the mental image, lying back in the room's hush. There's no light here except a sliver from the doorway and a few tiny holes in the upper. Wall windows maybe, or just clever ventilation. Either way, they let in just enough light to paint soft shadows on the curved surfaces. The ceiling hunches low above you. You wonder how many generations fell asleep to the same creaks in those wooden beams. The same flickering light from a dying fire outside. The same rhythmic breathing of their family members sleeping nearby. Historians still argue whether families slept in tight clusters like this for warmth, or if there were more defined private quarters. But given the size of most dwellings, it's likely that privacy wasn't exactly a top priority. And besides, when the coyotes howled and the temperature dropped below freezing, you'd want every warm body you could get. You shift slightly, imagining the feeling of lying there at night. The air cool on your cheeks, your back pressed against a warm mat, the soft weight of a hide drawn over your legs. Maybe you're listening to the final rustle of someone settling beside you. Maybe you're watching moonlight catch on the ceiling. Beams. The wind picks up outside and a soft whistling sound echoes through the canyon. It filters into your room like a lullaby, ancient and slow. You can see how sleep might come easily here. No street lights, no buzz of electricity, no intrusive notifications. Just the wind, the stone, and your own gentle exhale. In one corner. A faded design is etched into the wall. At first it looks like a crude spiral, but the longer you look, the more intricate it becomes. Concentric circles may be a representation of a migration path or a clan symbol. Or maybe it was drawn by a bored teenager who got grounded for trying to chase a turkey off the ledge again. No one knows for sure. But it's here, still watching. Still catching the light just right when the sun hits that tiny hole at dawn. You think about sleep itself, what it meant here. No bedtime routines with lavender sprays or meditative apps. Just exhaustion, habit, and the gentle rhythm of nature resetting each night. The sun goes down, the stars bloom overhead, and your body gives in, wrapped in the scent of earth and smoke. Outside, someone might be keeping watch, or maybe not. Maybe, in this season, danger felt far away. Maybe you slept with your doorway open, letting the cool breeze drift in, listening to the muffled conversations of neighbors whispering. Under the stars, there's no lock on the door. No hinges, just an opening, guarded by trust and habit. You wonder if they ever worried about mountain lions or falling rocks, or unexpected visitors. Maybe. But more likely, they worried about practical things, whether the water supply was holding, whether the next harvest would come in time, whether the mat weaving was behind schedule again. You imagine waking here in the early morning. The room just barely lit, the fire outside smoldering. You'd stretch, groan, rub the sleep from your eyes, and maybe crawl out toward the warm smell of piñon smoke and whatever leftovers made it through the night. One of the walls has black smudges at hand height. You run your fingers over them. Just soot maybe, or the ghost of fingers long gone. A child resting their hand here every morning. A parent brushing by on their way to the day's first chores. There's something tender about this space. Not grand, not ceremonial. Just lived in. Intimate. You wonder how many quiet stories began here. How many dreams floated toward the ceiling and clung to the beams before vanishing. You lie back one last time, letting your eyes close. For a moment, you forget you're a visitor. You're just another sleeper in a room that remembers every breath. You rise slowly from the sleeping chamber, brushing the dust from your hands. The space behind you still hums with a sort of restful hush, like it's reluctant to let go of your presence. But something else draws you forward now, a deeper pull, toward a structure at the center of the village that seems different, round, sunken, and silent. You step outside onto a ledge walkway, carefully hugging the wall. Below and slightly ahead lies a large circular depression in the ground lined with stones. A few wooden beams stretch across its opening like broken ribs. This is a kiva, a ceremonial room, a spiritual hearth, and an architectural riddle all at once. You approach it slowly, peering down into the shadowy bowl. It's deeper than you expect, maybe 6 feet down, maybe more. A small square opening near one side suggests an ancient ladder once led into its depths. Now there's only you, the wind, and the faint creak of ancient wood surrendering to time. You climb in carefully, easing down the weathered stones, feeling your body shrink into the quiet. The air is cooler here, almost damp. The temperature. Change is immediate, like stepping into the mouth of the past. Once inside, you stand still. It's hard to describe the feeling, like walking into a room still holding its breath. Historians still argue about the exact use of kivas. Were they purely ceremonial? Places for male elders to gather, to debate, to perform rituals tied to the stars and the earth? Or were they community centers, spiritual classrooms, repositories of myth and memory? There's no instruction manual, just soot rings, sacred ash, and oral traditions passed like whispers from one generation to the next. You look up. A hole in the roof lets in light, casting a single beam across the floor. The effect is gentle and theatrical, like nature itself is offering a spotlight for forgotten prayers. Around the edges, low benches line the wall. You imagine the people sitting here cross-legged, wrapped in woven shawls, maybe holding carved staffs or simple offerings, cornmeal, feathers, bits of turquoise or shell. In the center of the floor is a fire pit, now cold. Nearby, a saipapu, a small symbolic hole, is built into the floor. This, you've read, represents the portal from which the ancestors emerged into this world. Not a literal hatch to the underworld, but something more poetic, a reminder that life itself has a beginning, an origin, a moment of emergence. You crouch beside it and touch the rim. The stone is worn smooth from centuries of hands, maybe reverent, maybe just curious like yours. It doesn't feel sacred, necessarily. It just feels important. A bird calls outside, its voice bouncing off the stone walls and drifting gently down into the kiva. You picture a ritual in motion, soft chanting, feet shuffling on dirt, the scent of burning sage, a drumbeat as slow and steady as a heartbeat. This was a space of meaning, not comfort. A room for connection, not with the living neighbors up the wall, but with forces larger, older, and a bit unknowable. The plastered walls once bore painted symbols, some still faintly visible in the dim light. Red spirals, zigzags, maybe depictions of stars or rain clouds. The kind of motifs that make you wonder if people thousands of years ago understood the night sky better than we do, simply because they had time to look. You sit on the edge of one of the low benches, and the silence thickens. There's something about circular rooms, they pull sound inward, muffle movement, focus attention. You almost feel like whispering, though you don't know what you'd say. Maybe a thank you. Maybe nothing at all. One of the walls bears a curious groove, like someone dragged something heavy along it again and again. Ritual tool? Decorative carving gone awry? Historians can't agree. But someone left their mark here, deliberately or not. You imagine a scene, the first cold winds of autumn curling down into the canyon. The village gathers. A ceremony begins. Someone speaks, an elder, perhaps his voice echoing lightly off the curved walls. a story is told. Not just any tale, but one about origins, balance, survival. Children listen with wide eyes. A spark of fire throws flickering shadows across their faces. You blink, and the room is empty again. Just you and the wind sneaking in through the roof hole. You wonder how many generations climbed down that same ladder, sat on these same benches, breathed this same quiet air. You rise slowly, brushing dirt from your palms, and climb back up into the daylight. The world feels a little sharper now, the sky a bit brighter. There's something grounding about sitting where others once reached for meaning, long before textbooks or documentaries. As you walk away from the kiva, you glance back one last time. The shadows inside shift slightly, as though exhaling. You nod, silently promising not to forget. The rest of the village waits ahead, still drowsing in the afternoon heat. But something in you has shifted. You carry the circle with you now, a hush, a hum, a deeper breath. You walk along the ledge, your hand brushing the warm stone wall beside you. The path narrows, and the cliffside curves gently, revealing more rooms tucked into the rock, each one an exercise in patience, balance, and stubborn ingenuity. Stop in front of a partially collapsed structure and stare at the exposed side of a wall. That's when it hits you. These people built everything without nails. No iron spikes, no rebar, no fancy adhesives. Just stone, mud, and wood crafted with such quiet skill that their work still stands centuries later. You crouch beside the base of a wall, eyeing how perfectly each sandstone block fits next to its neighbor. Not perfectly by modern standards, some edges are wonky, some lines a little tipsy, but together, the structure holds like it's in a stone hug. The sandstone itself was local. Easy to break into manageable chunks, but soft enough to shape with hand tools. Each block was placed by hand, some the size of your head, others the size of a loaf of bread. You can picture the process: two people crouched under a rising sun, one slathering a wet mix of sand, water, and clay onto the wall, the other easing a stone into place, tapping it with a rounded tool. Then moving on, historians still debate how long it took to build even one room. Weeks? Months? Did neighbors pitch in? Was there a neighborhood potluck where the invitation read, "BYO stones"? You imagine the local complaints. Why is your wall straighter than mine? That's the third time that beam has slipped, Hoka. No, I said left-handed. Spiral pattern. The mortar, a humble mix of clay and water, held the walls together with surprising strength. In many places, it's still intact, gripping the blocks with the determination of a stubborn ant who refuses to stop holding your hand after church. You poke a finger at a joint, it's gritty, flaking a little, but it's doing its job. No cement truck in sight. And then there's the wood. The roof beams, or vigas, were key structural elements, roughly hewn logs placed across the top of walls, usually with smaller branches layered on top to support mud and earth. These logs weren't from nearby. The ancestral Puebloans carried them from forests sometimes over 40 miles away. 40 miles. Without wheels. Through desert terrain. You take a moment to appreciate that. You've ordered groceries online because walking 2 blocks felt like too much. Dendrochronology tree ring dating has revealed fascinating details about these logs. Historians have pinpointed exact years when construction happened based on the growth patterns of the wood. Sometimes, a sudden burst of building aligns with a good harvest year. Other times, construction slows, suggesting drought, migration, or shifting priorities like rebuilding a collapsed roof or finally fixing that hole in the wall everyone keeps tripping over. You crane your neck to look up at a partially preserved ceiling. It's low, thick, with branches now hardened to a deep, smoky brown. You imagine climbing up there to spread layers of clay and grass over it, making the roof as watertight as possible, though watertight in this climate might just mean good enough until the next dust storm. The rooms here were often stacked 2 or even 3 stories high, with ladders linking each level. You look up to a small square opening above, where a second-floor room used to sit. The wooden beams jut out just enough to suggest the shape. A ladder would have been lean there, pulled up at night to discourage guests. And no, not just visitors. These dwellings weren't all built in peaceful times. Archaeologists have found signs of defensive strategies, narrow entrances, high ledges, the use of elevation as protection. Whether from rival groups or wandering raiders, the cliff dwellings were as much fortress as home. Still, the craftsmanship suggests they were built for long stays, not quick escapes. As you continue along the wall, you notice an unusual feature: small holes punched clean through the stone. Too small for windows, too many to be accidents. Scholars suspect they were for ventilation or maybe anchors for tying down mats, drying racks, or even ritual objects. You peer through one and catch a view of the canyon stretching out below, drowsy and golden in the afternoon light. Nearby, a section of wall shows faint handprints. Children, maybe, or just adults with small hands. They're stamped in faded red pigment, angled slightly upward as if reaching toward the ceiling. You press your own hand beside them. The size isn't far off. The connection is unsettling and comforting all at once. You turn a corner and discover a collapsed wall, its stones scattered across the path. You pause, kneel, and run your hands over them, each one carved, worn, weathered. Some still bear tool marks, grooves etched by a sharper stone used as a chisel, edges deliberately angled for better fit. This wasn't casual stacking. It was precision by repetition and patience. So much patience. Building like this required knowing not just how to shape a stone, but how to listen to it. You couldn't force it into place. You had to feel where it belonged. You exhale, long and slow, letting the warmth of the wall soak into your back as you lean against it. There's no power drill buzzing, no construction noise. Just the memory of hands, stone, and the quiet rhythm of daily labor that somehow made a village cling to the side of a cliff and stay there. Your path winds toward a corner of the village that seems quieter than the rest, if that's even possible. The stone here is smoother, the walls more intact, as though this section received more attention or perhaps simply more luck. A narrow entrance leads into a room bathed in the pale, filtered light of late afternoon. But what immediately catches your eye is the wall. Color. Not bold, not fresh, but definite hints of faded red, brown, and soft black. Murals. Art. The kind of silent statement that says, "We were here, and we had ideas." You move closer. The lines are simple geometric shapes, zigzags, spirals, clusters of dots, but there's something intentional about them. At first glance, it might look like decoration, but the longer you study it, the more it feels like code. A visual story passed down through a language not spoken, only seen. Historians still debate whether these were spiritual symbols, astronomical records, or just very early examples of someone saying, "Let's liven this place up." Some believe the zigzags represent lightning or snakes. Others think the spirals mark the sun's seasonal path. You step back and tilt your head, squinting as the design shifts under the light. Whatever it meant, it mattered enough to mix pigments and press them onto the wallstone canvases in a cliffside gallery. You spot another mural nearby, fainter, a rough outline of a figure, arms upraised, head ringed with what might be feathers or rays. It could be a dancer, a deity, or just an ancient child's attempt at an action pose. Either way, it feels joyful. Beneath the mural, near the floor, is a cluster of pottery shards. Not just broken, artfully broken. Pieces large enough to reveal curved handles, rim patterns, and even painted motifs. One bears a delicate row of frogs, another what looks like stylized corn stalks. You crouch down and gently sift through the fragments with your fingertips. Cool to the touch. Ancient in your palm. The pottery here is famous for its variety black-on-white designs, corrugated exteriors, red slip finishes. Each style tied to specific eras, techniques, and even trade routes. Some pots were used for cooking. Others were ceremonial. Still others were probably just for storage, your average bowl for putting stuff in. You imagine crafting one from scratch. Starting with clay from a dry riverbed, kneading it with your hands, mixing in sand or crushed rock. For temper. Then coiling it, shaping it slowly over days, smoothing it with a stone, painting it with pigments made from ground minerals or boiled plant stock, and then firing it. Not in a modern kiln, but in an open-air pit, stoked with juniper or pinyon branches. Watching the color shift, praying it didn't crack. Hoping your fraud pattern survived the flames, you walk to a shelf carved into the wall. There, miraculously intact, sits a small pot. It's squat with a wide lip and tiny painted triangles circling the rim. The triangles are uneven, hand-done. There's personality in them, maybe even a joke. You lift it carefully, it's lighter than you expect. You hold it up to the light, turning it slowly in your hands. Who drank from this? Who carried it across a ledge to share water, or cornmeal, or something fermented and mildly celebratory? The pot doesn't answer. It just keeps being a pot. Next to it, tucked into a small crevice, is a tiny carved figure, an animal. Maybe a bird or a lizard. The lines are worn smooth, but you can still see the suggestion of a beak, tiny feet. It's no larger than a matchbox, maybe a child's toy, maybe a talisman, or maybe something in between. You're surrounded by creativity. Not loud or ostentatious, but subtle, layered, quietly confident. This wasn't survival alone. It was expression, identity, joy. Someone took time to decorate their world, to turn daily objects into tiny canvases, to leave marks, however faint, of what they saw, what they valued, what made them laugh. A breeze sneaks through a window slit, stirring the dust in the beam of light. You watch it swirl like smoke, and suddenly you're not in a museum. You're in a home. Someone crouching in this same spot, turning a pot slowly as they paint triangles, pausing to chew a bit of yucca root, humming something lost to time. Maybe they laughed at their own crooked lines. Maybe they called out to a friend in the next room. Maybe they were thinking of someone far away. You trace one of the murals with your eyes again. A spiral, just slightly off-center. It feels like motion, like continuity, like memory. And you can't help but smile, because even here high in a sandstone ledge, far from the noise of modern life, someone once stopped what they were doing, looked at a blank wall and said, "You know what? Let's make this interesting." You step out into the open again, blinking in the afternoon light. The warmth of the stone soaks into your skin, and the sun hangs lazily over the cliffs like it has nowhere better to be. You pause, watching shadows stretch across the canyon. Floor, long and slow, like time itself is taking a nap. But now you're starting to wonder, how exactly did these people manage? Everything? You turn toward the far edge of the dwelling complex, where a few exposed beams poke from the stone wall, like ribs. There, you find yourself beside what might be one of the most underrated marvels of this entire cliffside village. The infrastructure. You're standing at the top of what was once a roof. Not decorative, not just there to keep the rain off, but functional. Roofs here weren't passive. They were pathways, storage areas, and access points. In fact, many rooms were entered not from the side, but from above. You look down and spot the square outline of a roof hatch, just large enough for a person to lower themselves through. A small ladder once stood here, probably made from juniper. branches lashed together with plant fibers. Long gone now, of course, but easy enough to imagine. You picture someone climbing up, arms full of firewood, ducking their head just in time to avoid the beam. And the roof itself? Ingenious in its simplicity. Wooden beams laid across walls, then smaller cross beams, then a thatch of reeds or bark, topped with layers of clay and earth to insulate and waterproof. It wasn't foolproof. Rain still found ways to sneak in, but for something made without synthetic materials, it held up surprisingly well. And then there's the real unsung hero, water management. The Puebloans didn't have modern plumbing. No running taps, no pipes. But they were masterful in their handling of water in a place that barely offered any. The roofs and courtyards were slightly sloped to direct rainwater into collection areas, sometimes shallow stone basins, sometimes larger clay-lined cisterns. Every drop counted. You find one now, a little depression carved into the bedrock, ringed with a faint line of mineral deposits. You crouch beside it and imagine someone kneeling here during a rare desert storm, placing out pots, guiding water, carefully with small channels scratched into the stone. Not one drop wasted. Not one puddle ignored. Historians still debate how much of this was engineering versus adaptation. Did they deliberately design these systems from the start, or did the lessons come slowly over generations of observation and trial? Probably both. You don't survive this landscape without learning how to listen to it. And clearly, these people listened well. Further along, you spot what might once have been a latrine. It's not glamorous, just a shallow pit tucked into a secluded corner, now dry and filled with dust. But here's the fascinating thing. In some cliff dwellings, archaeologists have found intentional sanitation patterns. Refuse pits placed downwind, latrines located well away from cooking and sleeping areas. Even signs of ash being added to waste piles to reduce smell and pest. It wasn't flush toilets, but it was a system. A working one. You sit for a moment near what may have once been a communal space where people gathered to wash, store, or simply chat. Perhaps someone sat here weaving sandals from yucca fibers, their hands moving automatically as they gossiped about the weather or the latest batch of corned beer. Maybe a child poked around the rain basin trying to catch reflections. Or frogs. A tiny channel cut into the stone leads away from one corner. It's narrow, no wider than a finger, but runs in a gentle slope toward the ledge. A drainage ditch. Barely noticeable unless you're looking for it. You wonder how many years of trial and error it took to get that slope just right. One small stone is clearly worn smooth in a little groove, probably the spot where countless vessels were set down. You place your hand on it, cool, familiar, like leaning against the elbow of a friend. You climb back up to another level where several small rooms cluster together. One has a stone bench near its opening, perhaps a lookout or just a convenient place to sit while adjusting your sandals. You take a seat and let your legs dangle off the edge. From here, the canyon stretches in soft ridges. You can see the layers of sediment like stacked pancakes, millennia of earth pressed into stripes. Far below, a dry riverbed winds its way. Through the floor, now little more than a ribbon of dust and memory. You think about hauling water from that distance, about collecting snowmelt, rationing clay pots, walking carefully so nothing spilled. No taps, just the careful daily choreography of carrying life up a cliff. And speaking of carrying, how did they even get here? You remember those toe-hold stairways you climbed earlier, and now picture doing that while balancing a jug of water or a baby goat. These weren't occasional feats. This was daily life, and still they built. Still they stayed, because the cliff offered more than hardship. It offered safety, perspective, and in a strange way, simplicity. Everything had its place. Everything had a purpose. Even the humble ladder now lost to time wasn't just a tool. It was the bridge between levels of life, between the cool dark of the interior and the dry blaze of the canyon sun, between sleep and ceremony, rest and labor. You look down one more time at the narrow channel in the stone, that unassuming groove. You smile. Even here, especially here, someone once said, "Let's make sure the rain doesn't pool by the door." You step back onto a narrow ledge path, your fingertips trailing along the rock for balance. The wind has picked up slightly, whistling a slow, tuneless melody through cracks in the stone. It's not unpleasant, just one of those sounds that reminds you're very small and the canyon is very, very old. As you walk, you find yourself drawn to the edge of a lookout, one of the many natural balconies formed where the cliff juts and bends. From here, the view is sweeping. The dry riverbed snakes across the valley floor. The distant mesas rise like petrified waves. And above you, the sky is impossibly wide, the color of bleached denim. You sit. The stone beneath you is sun-warmed, and surprisingly comfortable, like nature's preheated couch. You stretch your legs and rest your hands on your knees, taking it all in. This is what they saw, day after day, year after year. And they learned to read it. You squint at the sky, imagining a time before smartphones, weather apps, or the kivas. 5-day forecast, when clouds were messengers, when the wind spoke in dialects, when knowing which way the ravens flew could mean the difference between a good harvest and a desperate winter. Historians still debate just how advanced the ancestral Puebloans were in terms of meteorology. There's no carved weather calendar or instruction manual. But one thing's clear, they paid attention. You don't build a civilization in a high desert without developing a deep, observant relationship with the sky. Across the canyon, you notice a small outcrop with what looks like a spiral carved into its surface. A petroglyph, common in these parts, but each one unique. Spirals, zigzags, sun symbols, sometimes animals. Many of them seem to align with solar and lunar event solstices, equinoxes, moon cycles. And that spiral? That might not be just a pretty swirl. It could be a calendar, a sun tracking device, or a really committed doodle. You remember reading about the famous sun dagger at Fajada Butte, not too far from here. A carefully arranged set of stone slabs casts, shifting shadows onto a carved spiral during the solstices, marking the exact days with light and precision. It's like Stonehenge, but smaller, warmer, and with better rock art. You glance up at the sky now. A single dark cloud hovers above the horizon. You imagine an ancient observer watching that same cloud, knowing from its shape whether it would bring rain or wind, blessing or trouble. A whole vocabulary of sky. The people here also watched birds. Ravens, eagles, even smaller species like swifts and swallows, all of them sky dancers with something to say. If the birds circled wide and low, rain might be on the way. If they scattered suddenly, maybe a predator or a visitor was approaching. You can see it now, someone standing where you are, shielding their eyes, squinting up, then turning to pass the word through the village. Rain coming in 2 days. No radar needed, just attention. Just listening. And then there were the stars. At night. This canyon transforms into a planetarium, no light pollution, no noise. Just a blanket of stars thick enough to feel like it might tip and pour across the cliffs. The ancestral Puebloan saw not just constellations, but stories in those stars. Navigation routes, seasons, ritual times. Entire myths suspended in slow-moving light. You imagine lying flat on a roof, wrapped in a rough blanket, listening to someone point out the twin stars of the hero twins, or the long arc of a sky serpent chasing the moon. Maybe it's a child asking why stars twinkle. Maybe it's a quiet moment between two people, who know tomorrow will be full of work. But tonight, the sky is enough. A gust of wind brings you back. You pull your shawl or well, your imagination's version of one tighter around. Your shoulders. Below, the canyon whispers. You hear something rustle nearby, a bird, maybe. Or just the stone shifting in its sleep. You notice now that some of the dwellings face a specific direction. Southwest, mostly. Toward the setting sun, the cooling evening winds, the long shadows that stretch across the desert like fingers brushing sleep across the land. Intentional, thoughtful. It said the dwellings were oriented not just for practicality, but for harmony. Sunlight in winter, shade in summer. Not everything had to be square. Not everything had to be symmetrical. Sometimes what mattered was how the light hit your doorstep at the right time of day, or how the wind slipped gently through your cooking fire and carried the smoke away from your eyes. You glance over at a pile of rocks stacked in an odd formation, a cairn, perhaps. Or maybe it once held something else, a sun marker, a wind gauge, or just a really determined child's fort. You'll never know for sure, but it's there. It mattered to someone. You stand slowly, stretching your back. The sun starting its descent now, casting amber light across the stone. Shadows spill into the rooms behind you, softening their lines, muting their memories for the night. The people who lived here didn't control the weather, but they worked with it, watched it, respected it. And somehow, that partnership between earth and sky, between stone and season, shaped every inch of this village. You walk back toward the heart of the cliffside homes, wind tugging gently. At your close, somewhere far above, a raven calls once, then goes silent. You look up and nod. Message received. You follow the path into a narrow corridor where the shadows fall longer now, stretched and cool. The light has gone, soft low-angle sunlight that brushes every surface in gold. You move slowly, the hush around you deeper than ever. It's the kind of quiet that feels shared, like the walls themselves are listening. And it's here that you start to wonder, not just about how they lived, but why they left. You stop at a collapsed corner of the village, a tumbled pile of stones and splintered wood beams. It's not the only ruin like this. In fact, many of these cliff dwellings, impressively intact though they may seem, bear signs of sudden abandonment. Pots left half full, tools dropped in place, rooms sealed shut with no sign of return. Historians still argue why. Some blame drought. Around 1275 to 1300 CE, tree ring records show a long and severe dry period. Crops failed. Reservoirs dried. Life in the high desert became not just difficult, but unsustainable. You glance at the distant riverbed, dry now, the same as it might have been then, and imagine the rising panic. A whole village watching their water source shrink to a trickle. But drought alone doesn't always cause a mass departure. People adapt. They ration. They find creative solutions. And yet, something changed here. Another theory suggests conflict. Evidence of burned structures, sudden migrations, and defensive architecture popping up in new areas point to regional tensions, intertribal warfare, internal disputes, or something more complex: political shifts, competition over dwindling resources, spiritual unrest. You look again at the soot-stained walls of a half-collapsed room. Was it torched in anger? Or simply caught in a lightning fire long after everyone had gone? There's also a gentler theory: migration by design. Puebloan oral histories sometimes speak of people moving on when it was time, spiritually or seasonally. Not as an escape, but as an evolution. A calling to walk the path of their ancestors, to leave behind the old and seek balance in a fallen. New place. Maybe it wasn't one reason. Maybe it was all of them. Or none. Maybe the story is more layered than any one answer can hold. You stand quietly at the center of a small courtyard, where the light filters through a broken roof. The air is still, but the sense of movement lingers as though you've just missed someone turning a corner or ducking through a doorway. These homes were lived in, loved in, and then left, but not abandoned. You kneel by a wall where someone once patched a crack with extra mud. The care is visible fingers smoothing the mixture, pressing it into place. Not the work of someone in a hurry to flee. The work of someone who thought they'd be here a while longer, and yet they went. You find a pile of broken roof beams, half buried in dust. Some have axe marks, clear signs of intentional removal, maybe for reuse elsewhere, maybe taken by those who moved on, stripping what they could carry. It's hard to know, but it doesn't feel panicked. It feels methodical. You spot an old grindstone left in the corner, still filled with the residue of yellow corn dust. As if the last meal had just been interrupted. Maybe they meant to come back. Maybe they did, once or twice, before finally letting go. Eyes follow a faint set of footprints in the packed earth, probably from a recent visitor, but they could be older. You can almost picture the final days. Someone bundling food, gathering tools, hugging a doorway goodbye, saying, "Yes, it's time." It makes you wonder, where did they go? Some moved south toward what are now the pueblos of New Mexico and Arizona. Their descendants still live there today, Zuni, Hopi, Acoma, and others, carrying stories, ceremonies, and memories that stretch back to places like this. Places in the cliffs. This wasn't disappearance. It was transformation. A slow migration threaded with memory, carried in language and dance and stone. You glance up at a ledge where a broken pot lies, its base cracked clean in two. You wonder if it was dropped in haste or simply left because it had served its purpose. Either way, it remains half vessel, half story. The sun drops lower, casting everything in amber. Shadows lengthen. You turn slowly in place, taking in the empty rooms, the open doorways, the wind brushing through like a whisper. You realize now, these aren't ruins. They're resting places. Not lifeless, just paused, not forgotten. Just quiet, you let the silence stretch, honoring it with your breath. And then you keep walking, deeper into the bones of a village that never really vanished, just moved further down the path. Your feet crunch gently over the packed clay floor as you pass beneath another lintel, this one low and partially caved in, forcing you to duck like a polite guest in someone else's memory. The air smells of stone dust and centuries. You breathe it in slowly, letting it settle behind your ribs like a borrowed heartbeat. The village is emptier now, not in a haunted way, more like the last moments of a long, warm party. Everyone's left, but the candles are still flickering. You find yourself tracing the edges of the walls, following faint indentations left by human hands. That's when you see them. Footprints. Not new, not clear. Just shallow depressions, smoothed over by time, but still there if you squint. Small ones, large ones, overlapping like echoes. They crisscross the floor of what might have been a common room or storage area, winding toward doorways, stopping near old hearths, disappearing into broken thresholds. You crouch down and place your own hand beside one of the larger ones. It's no more than a ghost of a step, but it speaks volumes. Someone walked here, not in theory. In bare, dusty, sun-warmed feet. Maybe they were carrying a basket. Maybe singing softly. Maybe just tired after a long day of hauling firewood up a cliff. The prints are worn, muted, but so clearly human. There's no poetry here, just the simple, physical evidence that people lived. That they moved through this space again and again, enough to leave their mark. You follow the path, careful not to disturb them. The floor underfoot is hardened with age, a mixture of clay, stone dust, and 1,000 tiny moments. In some areas, you see handprints, 2 tiny ones near the lower parts of walls. Children? Or perhaps adults working close to the ground, smoothing plaster or patching cracks. Historians still argue whether these markings were intentional ceremonial or just byproducts of daily life. And really, maybe it doesn't matter, because the result is the same. A village made not just of bricks, but of bodies in motion. Hands building, feet walking, eyes watching the canyon light. You enter a small room with a half-collapsed wall and a ceiling that lets in just enough sunlight to make the dust sparkle in lazy swirls. On the wall opposite you, there's a set of faint red marks. Vertical lines clustered in odd pairs. Finger streaks? Decorative slashes? A tally? No one really knows. But they're human-sized. They carry that quiet urgency of someone pressing into wet plaster, not for art, but for memory. You wonder who they were. The builders, the mothers, the kids who spilled beans in awkward places. The old men who told stories about stars, or the women who taught weaving by daylight and prayer songs by firelight. You wonder if they knew they were leaving echoes for strangers to find. You pause at what might have been a threshold. No door remains, but the groove in the floor where one once rested is still visible. You step over it slowly, like you're entering someone's room, and in a way, you are. This room is simple. Rectangular. No murals, no ceremonial fixtures. But the feel of it is no less powerful. In the center lies a sunken section, maybe once for storage. Beside it, a small ledge, possibly for sitting, working, or setting down a bowl of stew before the kids arrive to fight over it. You imagine someone stepping through this doorway, arms full of corn cobs. Or maybe slipping in just before a summer storm hit, wind chasing their heels, lightning splitting the sky behind them. They would have laughed, or sighed, or prayed, and then crouched here, waiting out the storm in stone-walled silence. You trace one of the prints again. The heel is lighter than the toes. Maybe someone was running. Or maybe they just leaned forward eager to get to the fire or to the person on the other side of the room. It's a small thing, but it stays with you. Later, you walk out onto another ledge path where the light has softened into that last sweet hour of the day. You turn and see that your own footprints are now there, mingling with the old ones. Different shoes, different reasons, same motion. And that's the thread, isn't it? The shared motion. Moving through space, carrying things, talking, working, resting. These weren't myths. These were people. With blisters and chores and that one neighbor who never stopped singing off-key while they cleaned their grinding stone. You sit down near a corner wall and lean back. The stone is warm behind you, and the air has gone quiet again. A bird calls somewhere far off. A breeze rattles the doorway you just stepped through. You close your eyes and picture them not in ceremony, not in grandeur, but just living. Gathering firewood, trimming feathers for a child's toy, pouring water carefully into a clay bowl, laughing when someone tripped over a mat edge, yelling up the ladder for someone to stop stomping around on the roof, and then walking across these same floors, leaving footprints behind, just like you. You climb a gentle slope carved into the stone, one of the broader paths that loops away from the main dwellings. It leads toward a more exposed area, an open face of cliff that overlooks the canyon like a natural balcony. The village fades. Behind you, replaced by silence, sky, and a wall of rock that looks, at first glance, blank dot, but then you notice the carvings. They appear like whispers in stone-etched images barely deeper than a fingernail, weathered by centuries of sun and rain. You squint, and slowly the shapes come into focus. Spirals, handprints, animals with long legs and exaggerated snouts. Some figures have halos, others dance, some just watch. Petroglyphs. Unlike the murals you saw earlier painted and fading, these were carved directly into the stone. chipped out with harder rocks, shaped by hand, hour after patient hour. You step closer, your fingers hovering just above the surface. You don't touch them. It doesn't feel right, but you study the patterns, letting them sink into you. What strikes you is the layering. Some carvings overlap others. Different hands, different eras, different purposes. This wall isn't a static display, it's an ongoing conversation across generations. A palimpsest of meaning. Historians still argue whether these petroglyphs were religious, astronomical, or simply storytelling. Maybe they were all three. Maybe one person came to carve a sacred symbol, and a century later another just wanted to draw a really enthusiastic lizard. There's no curator, no editor. Just stone and time. And this wall may even predate the cliff dwellings. You take a step back and consider that. These carvings could belong to the people who were here before the ancestral Puebloans settled. The cliffs. The archaic culture's hunter-gatherers who roamed this land with baskets, spears, and an eye for celestial cycles, which means the builders of the cliff village might have seen these carvings too. They might have stopped here, like you are, pondering the symbols, wondering who came before. Maybe they added their own. Maybe they brought their children here and said, "Look, these are old. These are important." The idea sends a little ripple down your spine. Not fear, just perspective. You step to one side where the wall bends slightly, and there a new cluster. Less abstract. Human figures arranged in a circle, arms out. Feet pointed like they're dancing, or maybe performing some ritual. One of them has a line extending from the head. A headdress? A speech bubble? Interpretations vary. You crouch to study the base of the wall. More symbols there, smaller, more cryptic. A checkerboard pattern, a six-pointed star. A shape that looks uncannily like a footprint, complete with little carved toes. You glance at your own feet and then back at the rock. A quiet grin curls across your face. Someone was here. And they weren't just surviving. They were expressing, recording, maybe even showing off. Nearby, another rock bears incised lines that almost look like maps, curving paths, clusters of circles, crosses, navigation aids, territory markers. A game no one remembers how to play? Theories abound. Proof? Not so much. But the mystery is half the charm. You sit on a broad flat rock near the wall. The sun has shifted, casting long shadows that stretch the carvings into strange new shapes. Some of the animals seem to move. A spiral unwinds in slow motion. It's possible that this area was once a sacred site, an outdoor classroom of sorts, or a ceremonial record. But it could also have been recreational. After all, where there's a blank wall and a loose rock, someone's bound to doodle. Your mind drifts to the idea of a child, maybe 9 or 10, sneaking off while the adults are grinding corn or patching roofs. The child clutches a sharp stone, eyes the wall, and chips out the world as they see it. A giant bighorn sheep, a lopsided sun, and what might be a smiley face if you tilt your head. You can almost hear the scolding that followed. Or maybe not. Maybe the parents just shrugged and said, "Well, better the wall than the water pot." Some of the carvings show signs of being deliberately defaced, lines scratched over symbols, faces gouged. A change in power? A forgotten taboo? A creative sibling rivalry? Historians aren't sure. What's clear is that meaning here was layered, contested, evolving. You notice a small offering tucked into a crevice at the base of the wall, a modern one. A tiny bundle of sage tied with red thread. Someone was here not long ago. Someone who believed the wall still speaks, and maybe it does, because you feel something here. Not supernatural, just deeply human. You walk along the petroglyph wall a little longer, letting your eyes wander from symbol to symbol, shape to shape. It's like trying to read a book where every sentence is a different language, and yet the meaning still hums. Beneath the surface, you don't need to understand every symbol. You just need to know they matter. As you turn to leave, a gust of wind kicks up, pushing the canyon air past your ears like a whisper. The carvings don't shimmer. They don't glow. They just stay. Waiting. Watching. Enduring. You make your way back along the ledge path, the sky now shifting into late evening hues, dusty pinks and gentle purples bleeding into the far mesas. The canyon sighs around you, settling into its cooler nighttime skin. The dwellings feel different. Now in this light, softer, less solid, more like dreams than stone. You stop beside a room that seems oddly unfinished. The walls are lower than the others, just shoulder height, and the corners don't quite meet. No roof, no hearth. Just a rectangle of effort paused halfway through. You wonder what happened. Did someone run out of materials? Did plans change? Or was it meant for something entirely different? You step inside. Even unfinished, the space holds a hush. But there are no answers here, just one more fragment of a puzzle with half the pieces, long since swallowed by time. Which, you realize, is kind of the theme here. Historians still don't know everything about this place. Not even close. For all the years of digging, analyzing, scanning, and debating, many aspects of the ancestral Puebloan world remain full of question marks. Why build so high in the cliffs when flat land was easier? Why the sudden migration? Why the spiral carvings? Why the round rooms, the rooftop doorways, the underground shrines? Why frog pottery? You smile. Not everything has to be answered to be beautiful. You walk toward a larger plaza where several rooms once opened onto a shared space. Maybe a courtyard. Maybe a place to grind corn together, tell stories, watch children race tiny wooden toys. Across the dusty ground, you imagine it full again, voices bouncing off the stone, laughter rising like sparks from a fire. But now it's just you. And questions. You pass a wall where someone once embedded tiny shards of quartz into the plaster. Why? Decoration? Symbolism? Or just because it looked pretty when the sun hit it, right? Some of the mysteries are practical, like the storage bins built into the floors, airtight, cleverly designed, often covered with flat rocks. Were they for grain? Seeds? Something ceremonial? Some archaeologists believe certain storage pits were used for burials. Others think they might have been spiritual offerings. Then again, they could have just been extra places to hide snacks from siblings. You kneel beside one and peer into the opening. Nothing but dust and stone now. But once, this was a container for something vital. Something worth protecting. Even if we'll never know what. Nearby, a doorway has a faint carving above it, almost imperceptible until the light catches it just right. A symbol like a ladder, or a pair of parallel lines with steps between. It could represent a literal ladder or a spiritual journey. Or, if we're being honest, it could be graffiti. That's the thing about history. When it's written in stone but not in words, it demands humility. You don't get to be certain. You don't get to tie a knot. Little bow around everything. You get suggestions, patterns, clues, but often not conclusions. And isn't that kind of lovely? Because the uncertainty leaves room for wonder, for imagining, for connecting not through facts, but through feeling. You pass a room where an enlazement, old charred post still leans into the corner. Fire damage? Maybe. Or just the slow rot of time and weather. You touch the post, it's brittle. Cracks spider out from beneath your fingers. It's lasted longer than it ever should have. Just like the rest of this place. You wander a bit more through spaces that have no labels, no museum plaques, no audio guides. Just silence and stone and the gentle curve of the land. folding around the village, like a secret, and maybe that's part of the design. The people who built this place didn't think of it as history. They weren't trying to impress future archaeologists or curious hikers. They were just living, moving through seasons, praying to the sky, fixing roofs, laughing, mourning, leaving handprints in wet plaster because, well, it felt right. You pause beneath a small overhang where someone once carved a narrow channel into the wall, possibly for drainage, or ritual, or boredom. Who knows? That phrase keeps returning to you. Who knows? It should be frustrating. Instead, it's calming. A reminder that not everything must be solved. Some things are meant to be walked through, wondered at, and left. Undisturbed, like a dream you can't fully remember but still carries meaning in your chest. You find a spot to sit as twilight deepens. The air is cooler now. The stone beneath you gives off the last of its warmth. The silence grows fuller. And as the stars begin to blink on above the canyon rim, you realize there's beauty in the unfinished wall, in the spiral no one can translate, in the vanished footsteps, the mystery pots, the sun daggers, the soot and fingerprints and petroglyph lizards. There's beauty in the not knowing, and somehow, in that soft uncertainty, you feel a kind of peace. You rise slowly, your knees stiff from sitting on stone, your body tuned now to the rhythm of the cliff. The sun has dropped behind the canyon walls, but the light lingers just enough to catch the edges of stone, warm gold fading to gray. Everything feels hushed. Even the wind, like the day, is holding its breath. You walk toward the edge of the village again, to a ledge you hadn't noticed before. Narrow, sloping gently down to a stone outcrop that juts just far enough to tempt a final pause. You follow it. The ledge levels out, and you find yourself at a small lookout spot, just a natural platform with a view that feels impossibly generous. Below, the canyon stretches wide and quiet, every contour softened by dusk. The walls glow with that secret color sandstone turns just after sunset, somewhere between peach and dusty rose. You sit, legs folded, back straight, heart soft. This is where you watch the sun set twice. First, in real time, the bright disk dipping below the western rim, light spilling sideways across ancient rooms and fading kivas. The shadows stretch, like sleepy fingers curling over stone, settling into every crevice. The village slowly loses its definition, its hard lines melting into the cliff that holds it. Then, the second sunset dash reflected off the opposite canyon wall, the sun's last. Light bounces, catching bits of cliff you hadn't noticed before. They glow for a heartbeat longer, like they're reluctant to let go. You catch yourself smiling at the trick of it, nature playing its final encore for the day. And in this moment, everything slows. The air, your thoughts, even the echoes inside. Your head hushed down to a whisper. This, you realize, is why they built here. Not just for defense. Not only for shade or sky signs or architecture or proximity to water, but for this feeling, the way the land wraps around you like a blanket. How? The stone holds warmth long after the sun leaves. How silence here isn't empty, but full. You close your eyes for a moment and feel it. The gentle thrum of stone against spine, the hush of wind around your ears, the flutter of some distant bird gliding into its nighttime perch. You imagine someone sitting in this same spot 1,000 years ago, maybe watching their children sleep in the shadows, maybe sharing dried apricots in a laugh, maybe staring into the canyon just like you, not searching for anything, just sitting, breathing, being. This place was never abandoned. Not really. Its memory never scattered. The people who left it brought its stories with them. In dances, in songs, in whispered bedtime tales that began with long ago in the cliffs. They carried the essence of the place the way your clothes carried the scent of campfire smoke, soft, clinging, impossible to forget. And the story stayed. Tucked into every groove, every soot-smudged corner, every worn handhold. Even now, even in the stillness, they hum beneath the surface. You take one more breath and let the canyon fill your lungs. And now, the light is gone. The stars take over, one by one, scattering themselves across the velvet sky. The air cools quickly, brushing your cheeks with a dry, familiar whisper. The canyon breathes. The stone settles. The cliff dreams. Let it all go now. Let your shoulders sink, heavy and warm, into the soft weight of sleep. The cliffs are still here. The village is still watching. The stone walls you walked today, curved and cracked, ancient and kind, are quiet now, tucked beneath the sky. No rush. No need to understand everything. You're part of this place now, even if only in memory. The footsteps you followed, the handprints you passed, the rooms you ducked through, they welcomed you. They held space for you. And now they rest again. The wind moves gently across the canyon. The last warmth of the day drifts from the rock, rising into the night like breath. A bird shifts on its perch. A star winks behind a cloud. Everything slows. You're safe here. Held in stone, swaddled in shadow, quiet as the cool earth beneath your hands. No more ladders to climb. No more questions to answer. Just the hum of long ago voices fading into hush, and the steady rhythm of your breath echoing back to you from the canyon walls. Sleep. Now. Let your thoughts drift like corn husks on water. Let the darkness wrap around your shoulders like the oldest, softest blanket. Let the cliff carry your weight, the stars soothe your brow, and the silence fill you up. You're not alone here. You're just one more part of the story, resting gently in the village between the stone and the sky.